Commodore fans, are you ready? It's time for another episode of the Vandy247 podcast on the 440 Sports Network. Keep it locked right here for the best Vanderbilt coverage. Whether it's Clark Lee on the gridiron, Mark Byington and Shea Ralph on the hardwood, or Tim Corbin on the diamond, the Vandy247 crew has you covered. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Also, like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's free and easy to do. Follow the crew on Twitter, Apple Podcast, and Spotify for podcast episodes. Lastly, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. And now, pull up a chair. It's time for another episode of the Vandy247 podcast.
Welcome to Vandy247 Live on the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Billy Derrick, alongside Robbie Weinstein. Today, we are brought to you by the Wash House. We're going to talk some basketball. I'll probably touch on baseball a little bit here towards the end, and then a couple of football notes as well that I want to get to in today's episode. But first, I want to tell you about the Wash House. They present our basketball coverage. Are you dreading laundry day? Is it stealing time to do things that you truly enjoy? Well, let the laundry professionals, the Wash House, take care of that for you. They've got 2 locations in Nashville. Just drop off your dirty laundry, and their professional attendants can give you back the one thing you can never have enough of, your time. Within 24 hours, you can pick up your nicely folded, fresh and clean laundry ready to be put away. Log on to washhouseclean.com or stop in today and get your time back. Robbie, got a lot of basketball to get to today, maybe a little bit of baseball. I don't think we've been watching a ton of baseball, but some football notes as well. But what's going on? I hear you're on a little spring break action.
I am, yeah, badly needed. And as most of our listeners here probably, I would assume, are in Nashville, or at least spend a decent amount of time in Nashville. It's been pretty brutal outside. So I'm really looking to, enjoy this week. And I'm going to Florida for a few days as well, which is going to be nice.
Nice. Yeah, it's up to 48, which feels like 80 degrees compared to what it's been the last week or two. So looking forward to it, to get into it today. Robbie, I want to start with basketball. We were both there on Saturday. It's kind of a weird game. Vanderbilt got up big and felt like, well, maybe this is the one SEC game Vanderbilt, can dominate an opponent and roll through. But I think we all knew Ole Miss would make a push, and they did. They ended up taking a lead. Malik Dia was pretty good. I think he missed like 2 shots and was going back and forth with the student section. But what did that win show you? Obviously, that keeps them on the right side of the bubble. But to me, it just again shows how much different this team is at home, and how the home court advantage has pulled them through so many times.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that has become a little bit of a fortress for them, other than that Mississippi State game, which feels like a long time ago at this point. It was almost 2 months ago.
Yeah.
I want to say Auburn. Auburn is the only team that has really come into Memorial and pushed them around. And even that was really just, it was at the very beginning of the game in the second half. Vandy had their moments in that game. I think Tyler Nickel summed it up really well after the game, where he basically admitted, like, we needed a game like this. We've been choking away these leads in the second half, or I guess in the case of Kentucky, maybe not a lead, but they were in good position to win that game. And I think they had a little bit to prove to themselves and to everyone that, they can figure that out. And I thought that not only, Byington did say it, that they sort of hung on there at the end, yeah, but it's not like they were just completely hanging on for dear life the entire second half. They did have to make a little bit of a run at one point, and they did so. And I just think in the SEC, when it's so difficult and Ole Miss projects as like a 6 seed or something like that, these are, that's a great win, right? I don't really care how you get it, even though it's at home. When you beat a top 25 team, that is a good win, especially as a bubble team. So that was a gut check situation for them, and it gets them really. They are so close to clinching a spot in the NCAA tournament, I would expect.
Do you think they need 1 or 2 more, Rob? Because that's kind of
I know. That's the discussion,
debate.
Right?
Yeah.
I would say probably two. I think
regular season
could work. One could work.
You're saying 2 regular season.
I'm saying 2 total. 2 total.
2 total. Okay.
Yeah. So I think the thing is, if you go, so the four games left, right? So if you win 1 and you go 1-3 and then lose your SEC tournament opener, which depending on the seeding, it could be against LSU, and that's not the best loss in the world. I think going 1-4 before Selection Sunday would make it less than 50%, but
Yep.
I think they would still have a chance. It depends a little bit on what else goes on around you. And as we've seen, Georgia has fallen off a cliff. I don't trust Texas. I don't trust Oklahoma. Arkansas, that game is at home. And so maybe that could be the one win for Vandy. That's definitely the best chance that they have left on the schedule. And then some of the teams in other conferences as well. Ohio State is kind of collapsing. San Diego State took a loss the other day. So, I mean, I think they've had a lot of things go their way on other teams' schedules across the rest of the bubble. But I think if they win 2 total, so either 1-3 in the last 4, as well as 1 win in that tournament, or 2-2 in the last 4, and then go out in the first round, then I think they'll be in, because they're not going to have any bad losses, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, and the losses, and Byington said this too, the losses you do have don't kill you. You just can't have too many of them in a row.
Yeah.
And Vanderbilt has done that. The Texas win in that moment was huge. It was sort of a stopgap in that brutal stretch for this team. And this Ole Miss win, again, stopped the bleeding. Now, it's going to be tough in College Station, as we know. Of course, this is the 9th straight opponent Vandy's going to play that comes off a loss. And you had a hilarious nugget on the board. Like, the chances of that were just insanely low. Of that
less than 1 in 1,000. It's crazy.
Which is insane. But the wins could be, like you said, Arkansas, at Georgia. The road games, no matter who you play. I mean, we saw that this team went to LSU, first SEC game of the season, had to really fight to get that one. No matter who you play, they could play South Carolina on the road, tomorrow night, and it wouldn't be easy. But so are you looking at Arkansas? And I know a lot of the analytics sites have Arkansas as a projected win right now. Vanderbilt will probably be a small favorite.
Yeah.
But they probably won't be favored in any of the other 3 games. So for you, is it Arkansas and then one of either Mizzou or Georgia?
Yeah, it is. I would probably lean toward Arkansas and Mizzou. Now, Mizzou is really good, but Vandy is tough at home. That's just how it is. Mizzou just lost to Arkansas on the road, and I think Vandy is a better team than Arkansas. So I would that would probably be the 2 that I pick. But there is a scenario where maybe Georgia, and this is what I would be rooting for if I'm Vandy, where Georgia continues to struggle and they just have no path to an at-large by the time that they play, that Vandy and Georgia play. I want to say that's the last game of the regular season. And if that's the case, then maybe I think that's a little bit different from playing a Georgia team that still thinks they can get an at-large and is like fighting tooth and nail. Maybe if they're more so looking ahead at least a little bit to the SEC tournament, then that can help somewhat from a mindset standpoint. As we've mentioned, Vandy just hasn't played very well on the road. So I would go with Arkansas as pretty clearly. That's the one I agree that they're going to be favored in. I don't think they'll be dogs in the other 3. But I think that I like their chances against Mizzou pretty decently.
Joey and I have talked a lot about this. The second half struggles, heck, everybody has. And Byington even mentioned after this game against Ole Miss that, look, we've tried a lot. We've tried almost everything for the second half struggles. And to me, Robbie, McLaughlin played a little over 30 minutes. I think it was maybe 31. Edwards' minutes went up a little bit to what we're used to seeing. Like I don't know what he's averaging, but a lot of games he's only played 23, 24 minutes.
Yeah.
And same with Hogard. But some minutes went up a little bit. I wonder down the stretch if that's something we see more of. But you're also seeing Huffman all of a sudden, his minutes go up a little bit. So what do you attribute the second half struggles to? I know people want to point to, minutes distribution and all that. But I mean, at the end of the day, there is a lot of, hey, you're on the road in this league. It's going to be tough. But what do you attribute a lot of those to?
I mean, I think some of it is they're playing really well in the first half and they seem to have a good game plan and they get hot. And then just naturally, if, the team that wins the first half is less likely to win the second half because the other team is going to make adjustments at halftime and the other teams in the SEC are just as good, if not better than Vandy. And then they come out extremely motivated. On top of that, I do think there's something to the idea that Vandy plays this scrambling style of defense that's a little bit frenetic, and maybe it could take a few minutes to adjust to that, and then you go in at halftime and come up with a plan, and then you can slice through them a little bit. And once you get to the rim, they don't have shot blockers there. I think that could play a factor. I don't know that the minutes specifically play a factor in the second half of games because the minutes are the same. It's not like Jason Edwards is playing way less in the second half than in the first half, as far as I'm aware, at least. If somebody maybe could fact check me on that, but it would require a lot of research. I think in general, I think it might be time for them to increase the minutes of their best players a little bit for the rest of the regular season and make sure that they clinch an at-large bid. And then once you get into the SEC tournament, you start spreading it around again because you're potentially playing on back-to-back days. I want to say Edwards was averaging like 24 minutes a game before that Ole Miss game.
Yep.
And I just noticed sometimes when he's out, the offense, they don't have anywhere to go, and Huffman can't shoot, and so other teams aren't guarding him. You'll see sometimes there's like sort of a reverse box and one where there's man-to-man on four guys, and then the person who's guarding Huffman just plays way off of him and is almost in the lane. That's going to be hard to deal with, I think, especially when you do get into the NCAA tournament, assuming that they get there. Other teams will craft a more detailed game plan, and I think, having him and Mignon fortunately stepped up and made some shots, and maybe teams will have to guard him now, but they've got a few too many like non-shooters on the floor, I would say, when Edwards isn't out there. Yeah. And so in my opinion, I get it. Like, he is the worst defensive guard probably on the team, but he's also by far the best scorer. So I think they kind of need him right now.
Well, another guy they need is Tyler Tanner. I mean, he has really come on these last, the home games, the home SEC games. He's made 2-3 big plays in the games. He had the dunk on the backdoor cut off the pass from McLaughlin. Had a couple of steals. Him and Mignon were really big on the defensive end. Did you see any of this coming from Tyler Tanner? I mean, I knew he was a good player and had a lot, some upside. I thought he could turn into a really good player. But for me personally, I didn't see this level of play coming from him. And he's still got some deficiencies. He's a freshman, but, and he's not playing crazy minutes, but he's really helped this team at times.
Yeah, no, he's not what I expected in multiple ways. Like, I had heard good things about him, and I knew that they liked him by far the best out of the three signees at the time. And obviously Jamie Vincent didn't end up making it to campus, but the old staff liked him. The new staff, I heard they were like really talking him up on the AAU like travel scene when talking to other coaches over the summer. And so I thought he was going to be a promising player, but then Mark Byington starts doing preseason media availability and is talking up how much Tyler Tanner is going to play. And I just kind of thought, a lot of coaches in the preseason talk about how much guys are going to play. This is not just a basketball thing. I think Clark Lee does it too. Mm-hmm. Everybody, the assistant coaches for football do it. And then the guy doesn't play much at all. And it's like, once you get down to it, they're going to play the best players kind of a lot of minutes, or in football, a lot of snaps. So I didn't think he would have this level of role right away. And I also, he was, he turned out to be not a very good shooter, at least not this season, but this great defensive player who's incredibly disruptive and, might have an argument, especially it's going to be tough because he didn't play that many minutes compared to like a starter, but he would have an argument on a permanent basis for being on the SEC all defense team. And that I definitely didn't expect when you're coming from Brentwood Academy rather than one of these prep basketball powerhouses that travels all over the country. But give him all the credit in the world. I think the 3-point shot is going to get fixed at some point, probably. Sometimes freshmen come in and struggle, with the longer line and just kind of shooting over more length. So he's going to give them the ability this offseason, which is really coming up pretty soon in terms of the transfer portal, to maybe spend a little bit less on a veteran starting point guard than what they had to do certainly last offseason. Let's say.
Yeah, that's a good point. Robbie, let's go to football. Some interesting notes that might have slipped people's minds over the last week and a half. And by the way, I know you've had your position previews going up. Is it every day, every other day? The last.
I'm just trying to space them out so that I don't run out of content like a few days before spring practice starts, which we're expecting to be sometime next week. I don't know for sure. They never gave us an exact date, but it's early March, so it's really coming up soon.
Yeah, so it's coming up, and of course we'll be there. But I want to start with Bob Shoop. I did not see this coming at all. Obviously, former Vanderbilt defensive coordinator to James Franklin. He was a DC at Tennessee for a couple of years. All of a sudden, he's kind of an older. He's not Jerry Kill level old type yet as a guy like that, but he's got a ton of experience and returns to Nashville with Clark Lee's staff to be a senior defensive analyst. Every Vanderbilt fan knows who he is. He's got a couple of sons that I'm not sure if they still live in Nashville, but he's been in Nashville a lot.
Yeah.
Loved it when he was here. So you got to imagine that factors into it in a way where maybe he wants to come back and live here for a while. But what do you know about this, Robbie? I thought it was really interesting that they made this move. I didn't see it coming.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about it, I don't think, until like shortly before whenever somebody put it on the board. I don't even remember who put it on the board. It may have been, I think Chris probably reported it, which it was a great scoop. I mean, I think it's a good move in that when the head coach is also the defensive coordinator, to get as many veteran minds in there to help take some of the pressure off in terms of the DC aspect of the job. Getting as many of those people in there as possible is probably a good thing. Shoop is not going to be, he's not going to have, for lack of a better term, like the power of Jerry Kill. Jerry Kill is like probably the third most powerful person in that program, and he really has a lot of sway, and he's not just an offensive analyst. Like, he has a serious impact on all kinds of ways that Vandy football operates. Shoop is not going to be like that. He's going to be just an additional defensive mind, basically, but I think he'll be a very useful one.
Yeah, and he's known for some heavy blitz packages, in general, and like I said, a ton of experience. So, that's a good hire for Vanderbilt. But even more importantly, there was a move on the offensive line. Assistant, I guess his title was assistant offensive line coach, or one of the assistants, Dylan Ottenreith, ends up going to the Titans kind of out of nowhere. I saw that on Twitter, and Vanderbilt replaces him with South Dakota offensive line coach Jeff Natty. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. But what do you know about that, Robbie? And I mean, right away, he was an offensive line coach at a D2 school. So that's a pretty quick replacement there for Ottenreith. But Ottenreith was highly regarded on that staff.
Yeah, and so let's start there. He was doing a lot of legwork. Chris Klinakis, the offensive line coach, is on the older side, and I think from what I've heard, he's a good technical ball coach, but he doesn't recruit really, and then there's been some frustration with that behind the scenes. They didn't sign a high school offensive lineman last class. That's kind of a problem. And so they are going to need some sort of long-term or medium-term replacement for him. And so this new guy, Natty, coming in from South Dakota, I don't know what the title is going to be. My assumption is that he's probably going to be assistant offensive line coach and will be sort of O-line coach in waiting that would take over perhaps next season. I'm not completely sure on that, but he's going to help a lot with recruiting, and he's going to be coaching as well. And at some point, I would expect he's going to be like the real O-line coach for Vandy. South Dakota, so FCS program that plays in the Missouri Valley Conference, which is the top conference in the FCS. And South Dakota was in like the top 10 and went to the FCS semifinals where they lost to Montana State, and they had one of the best offensive lines in the FCS, which is significant. So their left and right tackles are very good, coincidentally, or maybe not at all, probably not. The right tackle, who was second team All-MVC, entered the transfer portal a couple days ago. I already have a transfer portal crystal ball in for him to Vandy. That's all open to the public and everything. There's been additional reporting for Vandy247 subscribers, but if this is a guy who they get, then he's 6'7", 320 or 325 pounds, a big road grader, and probably would play a pretty significant role for Vanderbilt. And we'll see what happens with the left tackle as well. But there's some movement coming.
Yeah, and by the way, Clark Lee, if anybody's wondering, he was at South Dakota State, not South Dakota.
South Dakota State. So I don't know if there's a Clark Lee connection or not. There certainly could be, but Klinakis coached Natty his freshman season at Nevada, and so they definitely know each other. I don't think they have worked with each other before in terms of both being coaches, but Klinakis coached Natty for a year.
Should fans be concerned about the offensive line recruiting? I know you just mentioned Yeah, but like, how does that? Can you rely on the portal as much as they have?
No, you can't. I don't think you can, and I think that they realize that, and that's why they're trying to do something about it. Essentially, the other way to do something about it would just to be to fire Klinakis, I guess, and outright replace him. I don't think they want to do that, probably because Tim Beck and Jerry Kill swear by the guy. But at some point, he's going to have to, if he isn't going to recruit much. So Jarvis Strickland, the top target in the 2026 class, who's a 4-star offensive tackle from Paducah. He straight up told me on the record that like he likes Coach Klinakis, but that he doesn't really mess with recruiting. Is what the quote was. And it's like, this isn't how you win in the SEC. Like, I get it. If I were that old, for instance, I was out to dinner with my friend who works with our national team and whose dad is a longtime Power 4 assistant. And he says that kids, his dad is 65, and he says that kids are texting him at 1 a.m. telling him to hop on Call of Duty. Like, it's a young man's game, I think, in terms of recruiting. And so they were going to need to make a move at some point. It doesn't, if you don't really want to go through what you need to go through to get these recruitments across the line, then it's tough to be a position coach. And so for sure, like, I don't think you can just not sign a high school lineman in the 2025 class and think that you can keep doing that and that it's going to be successful. For the short term, can they cover it up through the transfer portal? Maybe, but you're introducing additional risk, and there's no doubt that the offensive line recruiting is like a really big concern that they're going to need to address over the next year or so. And I think this suggests that they kind of realize that and are on the pathway toward doing that. But there's definitely a long way to go, because as we saw on the field last season, it wasn't great.
No, it was good though over the weekend for the Vandy boys. They beat St. Mary's, swept them. They won 11-4 on Friday, 13-7 on Saturday, and then 10-0 yesterday. 34 runs scored, Robbie. That's encouraging for Vandy fans. They'll play Tennessee Tech tomorrow at 4:30 and then go out to Southern California this weekend. I wasn't able to watch much of it live. I know you probably weren't either. But any broad stroke takeaways here so far? I think they've played seven games. Maybe it's 6.
I watched the first game and a half or so. I mean, I think you just certainly the number of runs that they're putting up has to be a positive, especially because when you consider it's been freezing cold, and that tends to favor pitching for the most part, in that, when it gets really hot and humid, the ball flies. You can look it up. It's science. I don't completely understand how it works, but it has to do something with, I want to say, the amount of nitrogen in the air, and the ball flies more and you hit more home runs and probably more doubles and triples as well. And so given that they don't have those kind of, positive weather environments right now, and they're still able to put up 10 plus runs against a team that appears to be pretty good. I think St. Mary's was picked 4th in the West Coast Conference, which is a competitive conference. They beat UC Irvine or someone pretty decent, maybe UCSB prior to Vandy, and look like a decent team. So of course, the real test is going to come once they start playing SEC opponents. But I think to get to this point in the season and only have one loss and to be racking up some big margins would seem to be a positive sign, I would say.
Robbie, before we let you go, let Vandy fans know how to follow you, how to see your work, and maybe some things you've got coming down the pike. I know the position previews are still rolling out, but let people know what you've got coming up, especially with spring ball coming soon.
Yeah, I mostly just tweet out my articles, but what you should do is go to Vandy247, and if you kind of go to the right side of the little bar at the top, you can find how to subscribe, and there should be 1 month for $1 option right now, as well as 30% off annual. And this is a good time to subscribe because we're going to have multiple people at these spring practices, and obviously they won't be open to the public, but we'll have full practice reports and takeaways basically about what we see. And they've got 10 or 12 transfers who are going to be new to the team, who are practicing, as well as a few freshmen. And so there's going to be, a lot of new stuff going on. That's going to be pretty exciting. As well as, hey, basketball transfer portal is not that far away, honestly.
I know that's going to be interesting. That's really our first. I mean, last year was nuts, but this year will be our first with the coach settled in and to actually track and think about, okay, here's what they need. Here's,
we got a lot more to sell.
Yeah. And I mean, you haven't really, I mean, you like last year's portal season was probably crazy for you, but this is like the first big normal basketball portal season. I mean, you had some under Stack, but like this one feels like, okay, they're going to bring in portal guys that we know will help the team. like
They should.
like
Yeah. I mean, I
yeah.
think they're going to have, from what I've heard, they're going to have a competitive amount of money. I don't think anybody is claiming that they're going to have top 5 SEC money or anything like that, but it should be competitive and it should be pretty good compared to, for instance, what some of the ACC schools are dealing with.
Yeah.
And so and on top of that, they're going to have a fun style of play to sell and maybe an NCAA tournament berth. So you would think that I think they got some good value last offseason, more so than they only got the one big name in Hogard. And ironically, the value plays probably ended up being better, if we're being honest. And so they're going to have a big contract essentially come off the books, and they're going to have decent amount of money to spend. And I think players are going to be receptive to going to play there.
All right, Robbie. Appreciate it. Have a good one. I'll see you Saturday, I guess.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
All right. That's Robbie Weinstein from right here at Vandy247. Does a phenomenal job covering football and basketball for the most part. A little bit of baseball there as well. Looking forward to seeing what's up the pike here for Robbie. He's got the position previews rolling out really every other day, it feels like. So keep it locked into Vandy247.com. $1 for the first month right now is what we've got right now on Vandy247. First month for $1. So hop on right now and subscribe if you haven't already. As we wrap it up, I want to remind you the basketball team in action Wednesday night in College Station. That's a 6:00 tip-off against Texas A&M. Big opportunity for Vanderbilt, not a must-win, but they'll be playing a team coming off a loss for the 9th straight time. So let that sit in your brain for a little bit. Baseball in action tomorrow at 4:30 at Hawkins Field, and then they've got the Southern California College Baseball Classic Friday against UCLA, Saturday against USC, and then Sunday against UConn. All right. If you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. Give us a review and a 5-star rating. Like this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again soon with more episodes of the Vandy 24/7 podcast.